Joining us now is Dr. Heidi Hartmann. She's founder and president of the Washington-based Institute for Women's Policy Research. Dr. Hartmann's also a research professor at George Washington University. Dr. Hartmann, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
I know that you, at the Institute for Women's Policy Research, you have done some of the most important and most highly publicized work on this issue. Is there any way that the idea of a gender-based pay disparity is something that depends on how you look at it? Is this something other than a blunt truth about the American economy?
Well, I mean, you obviously have by far the better part of the argument. You've got the Census Bureau, and I might mention the Bureau of Labor Statistics agreeing with you. Oh, and also I could mention the U.S. General Accountability Office. I think what the issue is for the Republicans is that they believe that that's not, no matter how big the wage gap is, almost none of it is due to discrimination. And of course, these numbers from BLS and Census Bureau are not really talking about discrimination. But the GAO study that I just mentioned did, and they said that even when you put everything you possibly can think of in the regression equations, the statistical analyses to try to make that gap go away, you still can't explain at least 20% of it. Now, most other studies place the part you can't explain as a quarter to a half. So a large part of the gap probably is due to discrimination. But that seems to be what the debate is. And, you know, when you ask, can the Republicans convince women that they don't live in the real world? Probably not, because almost every survey that's ever been done of working women, when you ask them about their job, like 95% say my biggest problem on the job is a lack of equal pay.
In terms of just making it very clear, what you were talking about there about doing a statistical regression analysis on these things, controlling for other factors. I spent a long time going through the sort of Republican side of this argument today, just trying to understand how you could look at these very blunt numbers and come up with the opposite truth. What you're saying basically is that when you control for things like the number of hours worked, you're still getting a gender-based pay disparity that is not explained by working a different number of hours.
Right, exactly. I mean, Alex seemed to believe that if you put in working a different number of hours, that would explain it. No, far from it. If you look at all workers and all male and female in the economy, and we know that, let's say, during the childbearing years, about a third of women may be working part-time. So count part-time, count how much women work. Okay, I'm working part-time, I'm only making $400 a week. And compare it to all the men, more of whom are working full-time, you still get a wage ratio of 72%. So that means that 77% isn't going to move very much if you suddenly remove the people where the men are working 44 and the women are only making 40. Yeah, no, number of hours explains a very small part of it. I mean, these regression analyses, they include occupation, they include your education, number of years of experience, maybe sometimes marital status, number of children, blah, 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 just about anything you can think of, and you cannot make the whole gap go away. So there is discrimination. Now, those studies aren't even in a way counting the sex segregation that you opened your presentation with this evening. Those studies try to hold occupation constant. And you had all the data up there, occupation by occupation. We have some equal occupations. You mentioned police officers and sheriffs. Women are only like 1% behind there. Amazing. But you go to financial managers, they're 26% behind. So it is different within each occupation. But maybe why women don't go into police as much and go into nursing more is also discrimination. So even the exercise of trying to decide, you know, how much of the wage gap is due to discrimination and how much isn't, that's open to interpretation. That's why in Canada, for example, when they talk about the wage gap between women and men, they would use a number comparable to that 72% figure I gave you. They would use a number that says, well, look, just look at how much difference men and women earn in the labor market. I mean, if we believe men and women are equally competent, equally capable, also have to live and eat and support their families, we should be wanting a society where that gap is zero, where a man and a woman are making the same amount.
And then how to get to zero seems like that's where I thought we were on policy. Everybody agreed that there's a gap. We're trying to get it to zero. Let's fight about how we get there with all of our ideological biases and all the different places we come from. Instead, to be denying that the gap is there has blown my mind. Dr. Heidi Hartmann, founder and president of the Institute for Women's Policy Research, thank you very much for joining us and helping us understand this. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right.